Hello and welcome back to Pack the Rock Podcast, Episode 6. I'm your host, Carlo Barone, joined by Evan Gerike and Max Parker of the Hoosier Network. Guys, how are we feeling? We're halfway through the semester now. How are you doing?
Yeah, through the semester and the season. I've got midterms coming up this week. I think my only midterm is on Thursday, but it's online, so I'm not that worried about it. Sorry, Professor. We're also halfway through the season. Indiana's 3-3. We've got 6 games left. They're on pace to be bowl eligible if you don't look at the schedule at all.
You can say that.
Yeah. But yeah, this is podcast 6, so we're feeling like seasoned veterans over here.
Yep. That's all I got.
Yeah, I would say so too. We're definitely in a routine of things, but the IU football team sure isn't a routine in things. If you think losing 3 in a row would be a good routine because they just lost to Michigan, 31-10. It was tied at 10-10 at halftime, so I will say it felt like, I don't know about you guys, but when I was in the press box, it felt like this game was close for a little too long to call it a blowout or even like say IU was not in it because they definitely were in the first half. Now the second half was a completely different team that walked out of the locker room. I guess both locker rooms, but I mean, like I mentioned, it was a tale of two halves. So what were you guys' overall takeaways in that back and forth game? Or I guess back and forth for the first quarter or first half.
Yeah, I think for me the biggest takeaway was what happened post game, and we'll get into this next with our next question, just about the staff turnover. But I think that was the most blunt that we've seen Tom Allen post game. He was just kind of, we've seen him downtrodden before, just kind of. He just seemed, he didn't have that usual energy, that usual fire of, we're going to come back, we're going to grow, we're going to figure out what we're going to do. He just kind of seemed a little bit out of, he didn't know what to say.
Yeah.
And I asked a similar question to Connor Bazelak about what they need to do to put together a full 4 quarters of football, and he was a little bit lost. I mean, he said we need to do the little things right and all that, but I mean, this is a guy who's throwing almost 50 passes a game. He was 1 short this week. A touchdown and interception. Obviously, they had 1 called back. The running game's not really working. And the passing game is not working too much either. And they just kind of seem a little lost.
Yeah, everyone's a little bit baffled. And like you said, we're going to get into the offensive line on the next question. Obviously, there's a lot going on there. But it really does seem like the team is like, why? Like they don't even know why there's not been more success. It's confusing, and like you said, Tom Allen was upset. He was fired up. He was really giving more straightforward answers than he usually does. And you know, every single time you go to a press conference, you ask a question. You can ask however, whatever kind of question you want, and the answers are going to be pretty similar of like, oh, we need to execute better, and we're going to work on it this week, and we're going to look and see what changes need to be made. And someone asked if they were going to look at changing the quarterback or doing it during the game, and Tom Allen said we'd look into it. And I would be surprised if you see Tuttle come out to start, or not anyone that isn't Connor Bazelak, but I hadn't seen that since Purdue last year when he was pretty adamant after the game when the season's over that, yeah, we're going to make changes, and everyone knew that Nick Sheridan was not going to last for another week there. Yeah. This felt a little bit different because there is a way for them to turn things around, and obviously they already have more wins than last year, but to me this seems like a team that is better than last year. They just are so close to putting it all together, and it's just not working.
And, you know, I think that's a very interesting point. They still have 6 games to go, and a lot of those games are, again, I mean, this is a year full, and this is also something Allen said, was this is a rest of the schedule full of opportunities. It's not like they're lacking in chances to take down big teams or even try and hold their own against some of the lower teams in the Big Ten. But definitely it felt like, and that was a surprise to see them hold their own against a top 5 team in the nation for the first half. But definitely a little bit of the wind out of the sails with injuries to some other guys. And again, getting ahead of myself, we'll talk about that in a moment. But it was a good sight to see them finally kind of start a game off like they did at Nebraska with 21 points, tying it up 2 times, 2 weeks in a row now where they've gone into the half tied, but now they're struggling with finishing games.
Yeah, and this game really felt like the typical Indiana script where you're facing a ranked team at home and you go into halftime leading or tied, and everyone's energy is up, and then the team comes out and they're like, "Oh wait, we're better than Indiana. Let's beat them."
Yeah.
And honestly, it's like it doesn't even feel like it needs to be a full 4 quarters of football they need to play to win some of these games. At least maybe not Michigan, but moving forward, it just feels like 3 quarters of really good football. Like if Indiana's like, let me pull up the drives for the third quarter here. Punt, 3 punts, 1 went 3 and out in 7 plays. The longest drive was 2 minutes and 44 seconds, and that was a 26-yard drive. And it just feels like even if the third quarter, if their offense is working, they score a touchdown at 17-17.
Yeah.
And then again, with 1 quarter left, it's a 1 quarter game and things feel different. But, you punt 5 straight times, you have 3 and outs going into your last drive of the game where you turn over on downs, and there's just nothing there. And the offense just needs to put together another quarter and maybe just something more that allows you to score some points and not be so deflating in the second half.
Yeah.
And IU, if you guys remember, this game really wasn't over until the fourth quarter. Like we always talk, I guess we're talking about the second half here, how they kind of blew it, but they only allowed a touchdown in the third quarter to a top 5 team. That's 7 points at a quarter. You get that every time. That's 28 in a game. You allow a top 5 team to score 28 points. I would say that's a pretty good defensive performance, especially for a team like Indiana. Obviously, they allowed 2 touchdowns in the fourth, and it kind of got away from them. But they really weren't out of it until the fourth quarter. And if they can play like they did in the first half against a Penn State, or even against like a Maryland this weekend, or Rutgers or Michigan State, maybe they can win one of those games. I think, I've said this on the pod multiple times this year, I think that Michigan State game is going to be their best chance for an upset, you could say. Obviously, we're still a good 5-6 weeks away from that game, but if they're going to win one of these, they need to play a full game, which we haven't really seen. You've seen points where they've just come out and been a dud in the first half, and the second half they look like a different team. You've seen that vice versa, but until they put together especially a defensive performance of 4 quarters, I don't think they can take a Penn State or an Ohio State, who they still have on the schedule.
Part of that issue, too, with the defensive performance is they were on the field for 21 and a half minutes in the second half alone. Like, that's a lot of defense to play because your offense gets off the field so quickly. 8 minutes and 29 seconds of possession in the first half for Indiana. Like, yeah, the defense hasn't been great, not what we've been expecting. But, if you just look at the numbers per drive for Michigan, it's like it's 3.5 minutes, 5.5 minutes, 3 minutes, and it's like the defense can try to stop them so much, but then they're right back on the field, and it's like these guys are tired, and Indiana's playing a lot more guys. They've built up their depth a little bit, and they're not star players. You don't have a Taiwan Mullen waiting to come on the field. But when you're playing that much, like, you're in trouble for the defense, and they're gonna eventually give up some of those scores. If the offense isn't moving the ball, the defense is they've got to play way above their level, which is saying a lot. Like, this defense is better than what the numbers look like this year. They've been rated poorly because of just how much they've been on the field and how much they've allowed. And if the offense was competent, I think the defense would be, ranked 30 points higher in the nation probably. And Michigan doesn't score 31 points. Maybe they score 20.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that time of possession. I literally just pulled up the stats as well to talk about that exact thing. Michigan doesn't have any drives under a minute long, even on when they're throwing interceptions or turning it over. Nothing. They're all over. And Indiana, even when they punted, if it was a 3 and out, they had 4 different drives that were, and one of them was because they just ran out of time for the half. And then they have another
3 under 2 minutes, 4 under 2 minutes.
This is a team that just is not sustaining drives at all. And part of it, I think, they're not starting off very well in field position either. I think they're really struggling when they do force a punt, they're not doing themselves any favors with Connor Delp receiving the punts, and on kickoffs either. I mean, a lot of their average starting field position was their own 25. Again, Michigan's was only 7 yards further, but for an offense that's been struggling to get going in both halves now, they're not doing themselves any favors.
Yeah, I think for them, they gotta be better. And we really haven't talked about this, but I'm glad you brought it up, Max. But their special teams have just not been that good. You've seen penalties.
James Evans has been good.
James Evans has been good. I will say he has been good, but they've almost gotten no return yards from kickoffs or punts, which is an aspect of the game that you don't really think about until it bites you in the butt.
Mm-hmm. And they're putting Jalen Lucas on those kick returns now. They're trying to get him some more touches because we've seen how dynamic he can be. So that could be something definitely to watch moving forward.
100%. I would agree with you there. But, I mean, we've talked about it a ton on this podcast. Offensive line, again, I would say the offensive line in that room in general has kind of been the newsworthy aspect of this week for Indiana football. Obviously, I think someone mentioned it, but Darren Hiller, their offensive line coach, was fired on Sunday after the loss where they allowed 7 sacks to Michigan. I mean, what do you think the change in coaching will do for them? Do you think it'll help, or do you think it'll only hurt the room because Hiller was there for so long?
I think mid-season, there's not much that's going to change. I mean, this was a guy who was brought in as a quality control coach, and you have the personnel that you have. Now, they have some good offensive linemen in that room. I think they just really struggled getting things to go together well. And the grading hasn't been the best on Pro Football Focus, but they've gotten some okay grades from some of their guys. It's not like they have pieces. They don't have the pieces to put together a decent offensive line. I just think, they just really struggled. And this is something that just had to happen. I don't think you could go the full season with Darren Hiller, especially the way they were playing. It was just something that had to happen.
Yeah, they talked yesterday about it being kind of just a thing of accountability of like, this is a performance results business, and they're not getting the performance or the results. So you have to make a change. And, even Rod Carey, the new offensive line coach, he talked yesterday at the press conference, and, someone asked him, like, well, what do you think you can do? What kind of impact do you think you could have on this line? And his quote, he goes, I don't know, to be dead honest with you. I don't know. And he made a really good point. They're in the middle of the season. This is not just like he talked about. This isn't like a scheming issue. Like, it's not like these guys like are don't care or just like their positioning's bad. He says everything like on film is fine. It's just he didn't say this part. This is me taking out of into my own hands now. But there's just no talent there. Like there's not the talent needed to compete at the Big Ten level, or there's not the development needed, or something there obviously has been massively missing under Hiller for the past few years. And Carey, he was a center in Indiana. He played under Bill Mallory. He talked a lot about Bill Mallory in his press conference yesterday and how much impact he's had as just on how he coaches. Carey was at NIU when they were really good. He was at Temple for a couple of years. Did not have a ton of success there outside of his first season. But it's just like it'll be interesting to see if the offensive line really takes big steps forward. I would be surprised to see it. It's not like these guys weren't playing hard for Hiller. They loved Hiller. A lot of them tweeted out about how, thank you to Hiller. And Allen said when he told them it was emotional, and he said that even he himself loves Hiller. It's just you have to make moves occasionally when things aren't working right, because this is a industry that's based on winning, and the offensive line was not winning, so things had to be changed, and that's what Rod Carey is here to do now.
And what I will say about the offensive line, they definitely have not played the easiest of fronts, but this is also the Big Ten, so you have to prepare for stuff like that. Now, that Illinois win week 1 for IU is looking better and better each week. That front was I mean, they were very talented, very fast. They were pretty good. And then obviously you have Michigan's front, who's also pretty good. So the Big Ten, unless
Cincinnati was their lowest rated pass blocking of the season. They got a bad grade against Cincinnati.
Them too. I mean, it doesn't help the fronts they've played, but at the same time, like I said, this is the Big Ten, and if you want to compete, you're going to have a good offensive line. You could have all the playmakers in the world, but if you're not getting the ball, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
So it's the same thing. I mean, in IU, they do have playmakers. They have A.J. Barner, DJ Matthews, Cam Camper. They have guys that can take the ball yards after catch, too, break tackles. But if you can't get them the ball and Bezak keeps getting sacked, number one, he's going to get hurt, which you saw last year what happens when their quarterback gets hurt. Then you'd have Tuttle come in, and then I think after that it was Dexter Williams. But, I mean, if they want Bezak to play the whole year, they're gonna need better offensive line play. And on the topic of injuries, I will say they were pretty hurt last game. Obviously, no A.J. Barner, Cam Jones, or DJ Matthews. Just name a few. But if you saw last season, they struggled with injuries, and it kind of just snowballed into them losing a ton of games because they didn't have a lot of their best players. Mm-hmm. What does IU need to make sure they do this year so that doesn't happen? Because injuries are a part of the game, whether we like it or not. So what do they need to do to, I would say, better manage these injuries so their season doesn't go downhill like it did last year?
Yeah, and they talked about that this week about how the team is trying to play more people regularly. So when there is injuries, the depth isn't, you don't have guys who've only played a few snaps. You have guys who played 30 snaps a game already, and now you're just playing a little bit more. And Bradley Jennings this week is an excellent example of that. He's been kind of the guy that's filling in for Aaron Casey and Cam Jones, and one of them needs a moment to step out. He's been doing a little bit of both. So is Mike Holt, who is a walk-on that's been having an excellent year. Both of those guys have kind of stepped up, and you saw Bradley Jennings this week played really well. Maybe his one mistake was on that 50-yard run, and there's probably a few mistakes. I didn't dive into the film, but he said that he thought he should have made the tackle, thought he got held a little bit, and then you break out for 50 yards after that. But, you've got guys on the field that, we've seen them come out and we're like, who are these guys? And they're playing decent amount of snaps. Lewis Moore, Phillip Dunham as a freshman. I think Nick James or Nick Jones, I'm not exactly sure what his name is. Nick James has played some time on the defensive line. He's a freshman. They're doing a better job of making sure that the second level, the 2s and 3s are playing more so that if they need to step up in place of an injury on their starters, they're not falling out too far behind. Chris Keys this weekend and Brylan Lanier stepped in for Jalen Williams, did a decent job. Noah Pierce played a lot of it, though he might even be a regular starter for this team. But I just know last year he was kind of the guy that was playing 4 injured players and was getting burned quite a bit. He's stepped it up a little bit. Just guys like that where it's, we need to make sure that our second level can fill in for our first level.
Yeah. And I think on the offensive side of things, this was a team entering the year where Coach Allen was talking about going 8, 9, even 10 deep in the wide receiver room to start off the year and hopefully establish some go-to guys there. And, I mean, it's just 2 guys that you thought were going to be your number 1 targets in A.J. Barner and DJ Matthews. Well, now you don't even have the option to have them right now. I think both of them are in a situation where they can come back. Neither of them are out for the season.
No, there's some of the players that were injured are week to week. Some are game time decisions for this week. If you want to keep talking, I'll see if I can pull that up so we can make sure we get that right.
So, I just think I guess you just kind of go back to playing 8 or 9 deep and hope that someone steps up. Some of the younger guys step up, but that's just going to be a big question mark.
Yeah, so it's Swinton and DJ Matthews. Javon Swinton, another wide receiver, and DJ Matthews are game time decisions for this week. Getting DJ Matthews back would be a big boost.
Yes.
I believe he was in uniform for warm-ups this week, or I could be wrong on that. I think I'm wrong on that. A.J. Barner and Jalen Williams are week to week, and then obviously Cam Jones is out for several weeks, which is It's a big blow because he's a 3-time captain. He's a team leader. He's huge on this defense. Probably been the best player on this team all season. Although I made the argument in the press box that I think the linebacker position might be Indiana's deepest. While Cam Jones hurts to not have, I think that's maybe the most replaceable out of the injured the groups that group of injured players. But we have seen some wide receivers step up as well. Emery Simmons and Anderson Kobe have clearly been getting more comfortable, both on the field and with Bazelak, who he seems to be building that connection, and they've had a good couple weeks over the past few weeks, at least better than they were at the beginning of the season. What you have to do when, Cam Camper missed Nebraska, and even talking to him yesterday, he still seemed to be feeling the effects of his illness. So I know that affected him on the field on Saturday, and then obviously DJ Matthews hasn't been playing.
I know I talked about it during the non-conference schedule, but I think I like how you mentioned Emery Simmons, because I think he's the one that has stepped forward and really become the wide receiver 3 if you have DJ Matthews and Cam Camper in the first 2 spots. He's definitely stepped up, and I feel like, especially this week, Bazelak went to him multiple times. Obviously, I don't know the success they had, but he had 7 catches for 57 yards on 11 targets. 11 targets is the team high. The next closest was 8 with Cam Camper. So
I also think at least 3 of those targets that Camper where he was in the area with Bazelak just launching the ball out of the field. Yeah,
there's
a lot of those
too.
this week.
I didn't really factor that in too. But the point I'm trying to make here is he definitely trusts Emery Simmons, whether he likes it or not. If you're throwing the ball 11 times, whatever that stat actually is, he's definitely stepped up, and I think he's emerged as their wide receiver 3. But A.J. Barner, I feel like they still haven't had decent success with him in the passing game. He had that one touchdown, that one 50-yard touchdown first couple weeks. But other than that,
Idaho?
Yeah, I think it was against Idaho.
I think so.
Other than that, that was really a catch and run down the middle. But other than that, the big plays really haven't been there. You haven't really seen him go down the seam or a post route or anything in the red zone, which kind of surprised me given his size and catching ability. But I'm sure they're still working in the connection with him and Bazelak. But Bazelak honestly might just be a wide receiver quarterback because he's not really relying on any of those tight ends at all for a lot of receiving.
We almost had the Aaron Steinfeld touchdown, and then that got taken back. And I think James Bamba has had 1 or 2 catches, but really not much. But
he should, I believe he's coming back this week. But not totally.
So,
sure
but he also really likes to use those running backs in kind of the screen game.
Yeah.
Outside of Emery Simmons, your top 3 in receptions: Josh Henderson, Sean Shivers, Jalen Lucas, and then Lucas and McCauley both had 3. So he does like going to those guys, and it's really good for Indiana's offense because it gives them a chance to get the ball out quick to someone who can, especially someone like Jalen Lucas, who can make moves in space. Josh Henderson as well, and even a little bit Sean Shivers, but. And that's what worked so well for them in the first half against Michigan was they were getting the ball out quick and letting those guys kind of just pick up 8-9 yards on the ground. And then the second half, Michigan adjusted to counter that. They started dropping those guys. Basically called it kind of an extension of the run game, just doing those kind of passes. And Michigan kind of shut that down. And then he didn't have time to go deeper because the offensive line.
Yeah, the Michigan adjustments, final thing on Michigan here. They adjusted obviously a lot better in the second half than when they were playing in the first. But I like how you mentioned that they dropped down their secondary because they tried taking away. What I noticed IU had a lot of success on was those screens where you have 1 or 2 blockers in front, and then they drop the guys down. They forced Bazelak to throw it deep, take 2 or 3 seconds getting the ball out instead of just 1 or 2, which if you don't have a good offensive line, getting the ball out quick has to be a priority. Yeah. And when you can't do that, then they're gonna. If Indiana had a guy that could successfully burn a guy deep multiple times, that adjustment they made would not work because it would be one-on-one coverage and he just goes deep. But they simply just don't have enough time in the offensive line for that to happen.
Yeah.
So they adjusted well and they ended up blowing Indiana out 31-10. So moving on to Maryland, IU hosts them this weekend. They are a 10-point underdog to Maryland, who is 4-2, 1-2 in the Big Ten. Same record as Indiana in the Big Ten. If Indiana was going to win this game, what position group do you guys think would need to bounce back the hardest? I would say
Offensive line.
Okay, maybe not offensive line. Give me another one. Here, I'll start. I think the secondary because obviously they've got Tua's brother at quarterback and he's played pretty well.
Anyways, yes, I agree with you, Carlo, because with a high scoring offense like Maryland, you're going to need your big playmakers in the secondary, especially Tywan Mullen. I think if they want to win this game, they can't have they can't give up big plays. That's really got to stop, especially from that side of Tywan Mullen. They can't give
up. I'm going to go with kind of a similar thought process, but I'm going to say the defensive line. This is a team that, rushing, they've had decent success. They had 128 yards against Michigan, 225 against SMU, 193 against Charlotte, which are not great teams. Played Buffalo week 1 and ran for 150 yards, 175 against Michigan. So they're running the ball pretty well. I think they're 10th in the Big Ten, if I recall that number correctly. But the thing is, the defensive line has to be good enough to stop the run game, so IU does not have to devote their secondary to stopping the run game. You need to be able to drop 7 guys in coverage to try to shut down Tagovailoa. And if you're not doing that because you need to crash the run game, then you're in trouble because that's when he's going to start picking you apart and start throwing, big plays and stuff like that. So if the defensive line does not play well, you're going to see a lot of big throws beating guys in the secondary because you're doing probably more one-on-one coverage.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We know Maryland can score points. They've scored 30-plus in all their games except for 2. And one of those games was against Purdue where they had 29. So, round
close.
That's right. It's pretty much there. Point I'm trying to make is if IU's going to win this game, they're going to have to score over 30 points. And whether they can do that on a defense like Maryland, we don't know. But I think for them to win, they're going to have to win a shootout or they're going to have to play a good defensive performance. That's pretty much the only way. If Maryland just goes on a run, if IU gets down early and Maryland goes on a run, this game might be over. But I don't think IU has the defense where they can win an ugly game. But they're gonna have to. The defense is gonna have to step up at some point, and their pass rush is going to have to. They're gonna have to get a couple sacks. And a big thing we really haven't talked about with Indiana's defense is their lack of turnovers. They got 1 against Michigan, but other than that, I can't really remember many other turnovers they have.
They've been better this year than last year for sure. I know they've had a few interceptions, timely interceptions as well.
Yeah, they've come at big times.
Yeah, but not enough. Like this needs to be a team that doesn't have to be big time where it's like, oh, we just pick them off.
Yeah.
Yeah, they honestly had a couple more chances. That Devon Matthews shared possession one, he probably should have come down with, and he told us he thought he should have come down with it. But yeah, the turnovers are kind of a big thing. They need to shut down the offense by giving IU's offense back the ball.
Yeah,
and they have not done enough of that. You're right with that, Carla.
Yeah, they're gonna have to force, I would say, at least 1 turnover if they're gonna win this game. And you see, and this goes for pretty much any level of football. If you win the turnover battle, you usually win the game. That obviously there's exceptions, but I would say most times if you win the turnover battle, you usually win the game. And IU did not win the turnover battle. They also got one of their kicks blocked against Michigan.
Yeah.
We totally did just have not talked about that. But they also blocked one of Michigan's kicked.
Back-to-back drives. Yeah, that was weird.
That was a crazy sequence there. But yeah, they're going to have to generate turnovers if they want to win. So speaking of Maryland, now we go on our predictions. I have been leading all season, not to hype myself up here, but I'm at 5-1, and you guys are at 4-2. So I started last week. I don't know who started before that, but I will not be the one to go first. So
Okay, go.
All right, I'll go
ahead. You guys are so nice.
I will say, I think Indiana we have not given them credit for playing well at home. Obviously, well means scraping out 3 victories and battling Michigan for a half. But they're clearly a better team at home than on the road. And I think, it's a 3:30 kick this week. You should have a decent-sized crowd for Maryland. It is fall break, but I don't really know how many people go home for fall break. I personally don't really care because I have Friday off of classes anyway. Although a few of my professors have canceled class on Thursday, so that is nice. So thank you to those professors.
Nice.
I still have one class on Thursday, but
Me too.
I'll get out a lot earlier. Usually I'm going until about 5 on Thursdays, and this week I'll be done by about 1. So this is really, really off point. I'm not predicting that my professor's going to call class. No, I think Indiana last year, they played their best Big Ten offensive game against Maryland. It was a 38-35 loss. I think that's the right score.
Yeah.
No one fact checked me. It's a pretty similar Maryland team this year, maybe a little bit better. I really still think Indiana's got more offensive potential than they did last year, and they can put it all together. And I think if you're going to do it against any defense, Maryland might be a decent one to do it against. So all that said, I'm going to pick Maryland to win still. I'm going to go 32-25.
Okay. Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick Maryland as well. I think Indiana covers. I think it's another situation where Maryland gets close to 30, but don't quite get there. Couldn't get there against Purdue, but I think they'll get close. I think let's call it 27. I know it's a weird number, but I like weird numbers in predictions. Let's go 27-18.
That is a weird number.
Well, that might be scoregami if that happens.
Let's make it happen.
Probably not in college football.
Probably not in college, actually.
Yeah, that score's definitely happened before.
Yeah.
What you got, Carlo?
I wrote it down on the doc already. I've got 35-31 Terps. I really don't see Maryland scoring under 30 this game. And whether IU gets to 31, we'll see.
Yeah. That'd be an improvement.
Yeah.
They've had games where they've gotten well, but you mentioned that they played well against Maryland last year, and I believe Donovan McCulley was the one that started at quarterback.
I think so.
Against Maryland. They still scored over 30. I think they can do that with Bazelak. Now, I have Maryland winning, but I think they do get 31.
Yeah, I didn't pull up last year's game, but I remember them running the ball well and passing the ball pretty well. I think they had about 200 yards in each, and that was kind of their biggest game. But yeah, there's a small chance Indiana can win this one. Better chance than some of their games upcoming, except for Rutgers maybe. And if for whatever reason this team decides to pull everything together finally, we could see a game that is close that maybe Indiana comes out on top of. But I'm kind of surprised we all went as close as we did. I think we all said Indiana covers. And
I was about to mention that. We all said they covered.
I also don't think I would have laughed at you if you made a prediction of another 31-10 Maryland win. I mean, it's hard to tell with this Indiana team what team you're going to get, except they keep showing us they're giving the same team, and for some reason we keep giving them more credit than maybe they deserve. But I think we just want to cover a better team. We're not rooting for Indiana, but it is hard to cover a team that's been playing like this. So
I will say this season they are 3-3, but those 6 games they've been 6 games, all right. They've had some moments in those games.
The thing about football games is they feel like football games.
True.
No way.
True.
I can't.
True.
They do.
They do.
That's a crazy.
I would say this season is definitely given Hoosier fans and the people that cover the team
Headaches.
A lot of headaches. A lot of exciting plays by both sides. A lot of long plays.
I think Twitter would disagree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, whether you like IU or not, you can't doubt or you can't deny that. I mean, the Illinois game, the Idaho game, there's been a lot of moments this season where it's been exciting to watch as an unbiased reporter now. But
I think people on Twitter would trade the football program for like new chairs in Assembly Hall. I don't think people.
I think that would that might be a fair trade.
Wow. That's wild.
I showed Carlo about TweetDeck this weekend.
That's wild.
Where I always have the IUFB hashtag up, kind of refreshing on my feed while I'm live tweeting games. And some of those tweets, man, are just absolutely
not happening.
When they blocked
crazy.
the field goal, oof.
Yeah, things. Things are fun. It's fun to keep up with what people are saying, although you kind of need to not look at it every once in a while for the sake of your sanity.
True.
It's like they'll go 3 and out in like the first drive, and they'll be like, "Fire everyone!
Yep.
Get him out of here! New quarterback."
Well, great news for Twitter. They did fire Darren Hiller this week, so I'm sure everyone will be happy going into the Maryland game, and there will be no calls for anyone else to get fired.
There will be no complaints.
That's a
no
everything. All right, one more
bold prediction of this week. People on Twitter will be happy.
One more closing thought. When this thing comes out tomorrow, it'll be this man's birthday. So, happy birthday!
Happy early birthday,
Evan.
Evan. I guess when this comes out, happy birthday, man.
Happy birthday.
Happy 23rd. Hope you spend it well.
22nd.
It is my 22nd.
That was a joke.
Oh.
Yikes.
Well, the Twitter people.
They don't get that.
Well, I said it for YouTube. I said for YouTube. But yeah, 22nd birthday for Evan here. So. Hope you spend it well.
I will probably be in class as I usually am because I'm a good little student.
Good little student.
If it was my birthday. Thank you for tuning in to Pack the Rock Podcast, episode 6, available on YouTube and Spotify. I've been your host, Carlo Barone, joined by Evan Gerike and Max Parker of the Hoosier Network. We'll see if Indiana can even their Big Ten record this weekend at 2-2. If not, the fall to 1-3. We'll see you guys next week.